And now, I'm so excited to introduce you to our speakers. Mary Roach is the author of 7 best-selling works of nonfiction, including Grunt, Stiff, and most recently, Fuzz. Her writing has appeared in National Geographic, the New York Times, and many other publications. Marianne Gwinn writes about books and authors for Kirkus Reviews, the Los Angeles Times, and other publications. A Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, she was the book editor of the Seattle Times from 1998 to 2017, and she's also the co-host of Well Read, a national books and authors television show. Would you please join me in welcoming Marianne and Mary to our stage?
Hello, I'm Marianne Gwinn, and here's the person that you came to see, Mary Roach.
Hello, hello. Oh, I have to turn it on. Hello? Ah. Okay, it wasn't even a little red, green light or anything. How are you all? Thank you for coming out in the rain. I guess you guys, rain doesn't keep you at home.
So I was the book editor of the Seattle Times for many years, and I read a number of Mary's books and loved all of them. And I loved this one too. I think this is a really ambitious topic. It really opened my eyes to developments I had only the vaguest notion of, and made me think of issues that we're all going to confront. I got to say, as I read, I kept writing yikes in the margins.
Then I've done my job.
What is it about developing replacement human body parts that induces a certain queasiness, do you think?
Oh, because I think in order to benefit from a replacement body part, you've either got to have one taken out or it's falling apart and it's yours and
yeah, you kind of got to be in trouble to need one, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So where did your mission to explain science to the rest of us come from? What was the beginning?
My mission or my permission?
Either one.
Because I don't think I have permission. Yeah, you know, I didn't study science in college. I wound up writing for a couple of magazines, Discover magazine and a magazine called Hippocrates, which changed names a couple of times, and I enjoyed, I used to like to travel a lot, and I'd been doing a lot of traveling for the magazines that I wrote for, and at a certain point, I guess the human body started to seem like a really interesting planet that there was always a lot more to explore, and I didn't know squat about it when I started out, and I've just enjoyed learning about it, and I guess I've enjoyed sharing that learning as I go. It's not really a mission, it's just, I guess it's something that I can do and make a living and enjoy. So there you go.
So where did the germ of the idea for this book come from?
A couple of things. I got an email from, when I'm in, I'm in the mode of looking for a book topic. I'm always just sort of, anybody I talk to, I'm kind of interested in picking their brains. But a reader had written to me and said, for your next book, I think you should write a book about professional football referees. And I thought that was probably the farthest off-base suggestion I'd ever received, but I was, I thanked her and we were communicating, and it turned out she She's an amputee, specifically an elective amputee. She's someone who her foot was twisted. She'd had spina bifida. She'd had a number of operations on her foot, and it just never got to the place where she could move or hike or do the things she wanted to do, and she very much wanted it cut off and couldn't find a surgeon to do that. And I thought that was an interesting conundrum, you know, searching for someone to cut off your foot. And around that time, I was picking the brain of somebody who works in a stem cell lab. Well, actually, it's called the Fat Lab. She works with adipose stem cells, and the conversation kind of wandered because I'd been thinking, oh, maybe a book about fat, right? But then that's, you know, it's going to be about weight loss and But in the course of that conversation, she happened to mention, and I don't remember how this came up, but my conversations kind of wander, and she mentioned that there was a surgeon who had reconstructed a man's penis using his middle finger. And I, of course, pictured the finger taken intact with the nail and everything, and just installed as is. But that's, of course, not what happened. But I found this paper. It exists. It was in Georgian because the surgeon is in the country of Georgia. I wrote using Google Translate, so Lord knows what my letter actually said. And the surgeon never replied, ever, not to Georgian, not to Russian, not to English. So I said to my friend Stephanie, who I have traveled with many times over the years, the Caucasus Mountains are beautiful this time of year, and there's a man who built a penis out of a finger. Let's go. So, anyway, that was, I think that the amputee, Judy, got me kind of headed in that direction, and then the finger penis just clinched it. It's like, okay, that's where we're going. I never thought I want to write a book about regenerative medicine. I don't even know if I have written a book about regenerative medicine. I don't entirely know what the definition of regenerative, I mean, any regeneration at all, I don't know. But that's how it happened. That is how it happened.
You went to Georgia to see that guy, and you didn't have an appointment with him, did you? You never actually saw him, right?
Correct. Yeah, no, I know. So yeah, I got there, and the woman who runs the office spoke some English, and I said, I'm that person who keeps sending garbled letters in Georgian and Russian, and I were hoping to see Dr. Kuzanov, and she said, oh, well, he's on vacation. And I said, but we've traveled all the way from America. To which the answer logically would be, well, you're a couple of idiots. But as I had hoped, she took pity on me, and there was another surgeon there who was familiar with the procedure, and she said, well, Dr. Kuzanov's laptop is there, and I can find the file and some photographs. And so she did. But I still have some questions. I still don't know why, when there are perfectly acceptable medical surgical penile implants that you can use, why a middle finger? He was using it for rigidity. He was building. He then took skin from the underside of the forearm and wrapped it around. I mean, it was very realistic. It looked like a penis. It did not look like a finger. However.
Oh, I know it's coming.
It bends like a finger. It does. It does. And I said, is that so, to tuck out of the way? And she said, yes, so he can put on his pants. So, and the slide that stayed with me was And I think that this was to demonstrate that it was strong, this penis, but her face. In one slide, there's a ceramic water pitcher hanging from. It wasn't full of water. It's not that strong. But it was white with like green and red. It was kind of old-timey, almost handmade-looking water pitcher. And
Well, that was Georgia. Wow.
that was what?
That was Georgia. So then you went to China to visit what you describe as the world's cleanest pigsty.
Yes.
What was happening there, and why did you have to go to China to see it?
Yeah, well, this is a chapter about xenotransplantation, which is a technique you may have heard of, where a pig is genetically edited such that its organs are not as reactive. They're a little closer to a human or further from a pig. So they knock out, it's called the alpha-gal protein. So that's a genetically tweaked pig. So now these pigs are raised to have organs for transplantation. And there are 2 companies here in the United States that create these, that have these facilities. These pig superclean, these are superclean, that's a technical term, pig farms. eGenesis and United Therapeutics, both of whom I contacted, and we had a lovely time on Zoom. The CEO got on there, and everything seemed to be great, and then they ghosted me. I think that the explanation for that lies in the line, we just need to check with legal. So at that point, I contacted someone. I looked around on PubMed, and there are people in other countries who've worked on this. And in China, there's someone who's been working on xenotransplantation for 30 years. I thought of it as something that, because it's only been in the past couple of years that you would read in the news about a patient receiving a pig kidney or heart. I assumed it was brand new, but it's been underway for a while. That's why I went to China, because nobody would host me here. I wanted to I was curious about what does a super clean, pathogen-free pigsty, how does that work? And the folks in China, the researcher and a couple of the researchers were very welcoming. And China, in fact, is, I think, a good setting for the chapter because there's no cultural tradition of donating organs.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
So
it's Confucianism, isn't
yes.
it? There's a tradition. Yeah.
Yeah, it's considered disrespectful to your ancestors. Your body was a gift from your ancestors, and so you don't mess with it. And you need it in another lifetime. There's various reasons why people just don't donate. And so the only organs available are those from death row prisoners or political prisoners. So there's a big need for organs in China. And so this would, if this gets going. And I think this month is the first trial of a pig kidney with, I think there's a dozen or so patients is underway. The people who've received them so far have been compassionate care exemptions from the FDA. There's people who are so ill that they won't be able to get a human organ. So the companies have been permitted to try a pig organ. Mm-hmm. And most of them have lasted about 2 months, but these are people who are quite ill. There's currently someone who's up to 8 or 9 months with a pig kidney. Pig knee, I almost said.
Why do you think the Chinese invited you to come? What were they hoping to gain?
I don't know that they were hoping to gain anything other than maybe recognition. They didn't put themselves out there as, we've been doing this longer and we will be first. They were pretty humble about it, which I didn't expect. The Xiaoping Deng, the researcher I visited, said, The United States will be first, Germany will be second, China will be third. Yeah.
Wild. So my family has a code for saying when something is kind of beyond our imagination, we go, wow, that is pretty sci-fi. And what is the most sci-fi thing you witnessed in researching this book?
The most sci-fi thing, I didn't really witness it because it is sci-fi. I would have to say chimerism, which is, this is something, I mean, apparently it's made it as far as rodents. Okay, so what this would be, again, let's say it's a pig. It's a genetic edit on when it's, just a cluster of cells. So you're making a tweak such that the pig is not going to grow a kidney. Now you're introducing human pluripotent stem cells, and they're going to go in that niche. And so this pig will grow a literal human kidney. And the idea is that fast forward into the sci-fi future, you would have your own personal pig with a bunch of spare parts waiting to go because they're human parts, and you wouldn't have to do immunosuppression, and it's pretty weird.
It's pretty weird. Is that in progress at all, or?
Well, you'll find papers on chimerism. Yi Wang, who's the researcher in China that I spoke to, a friend of hers who is here in the United States, is working on it. He managed to, I think it was, I don't know if it was a rodent or a pig, but it grew a very, very primitive kidney, mesonephros, so it's a very, not a full, just a junior part. So that's about as far, and whether it would continue to grow to full size, because the gestation periods are different, so, and can you be sure that the human cells would stay put, or would there be some in the brain, and what if the pig started to have human intelligence and self-awareness, and anyway, that's the most sci-fi thing.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah.
Okay. I found some really inspiring stories in the book of people working very hard to just relieve people's suffering. I mean, is there a particular thing like that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think what was kind of most amazing in that realm for me, I spent a couple of days at the Sumner M. Redstone Burn Clinic at Mass General, which is a very famous burn unit, and I didn't know anything about burns and how you care for them. And I spent time with a surgeon who kind of explained grafting and how it works, and how if someone has third-degree burns on a large portion of their body, it's a long process, because ultimately you need to take their own skin, and there's not a lot of real estate left. So it's a very long process, and the other thing that happens with third-degree burns is that rather than the skin renewing from below as it would with a less serious burn, the body tries to close the wound by contracting, and so then you have those terrible scarring, where the disfigurement, where the jaw the skin here would pull down, or the elbow, you couldn't open your arm, or your eye would be held open, and those all have to be released. They're surgically cut, and then you need a graft to fill that in. So it's a relationship. The surgeon and the patient will spend, it's dozens of operations, and they get to know each other. And I met this woman who'd been burned over 90% of her body, and we had dinner with her and her surgeon and her husband, and it just was amazing to see. I mean, she was beautiful. You could tell, you could see sort of the patchwork of grafts, but she's wearing a sleeveless shirt, and she sat with her back to the wall, facing the room. She was very confident. and so grateful to this surgeon. And she was getting married in a few months, and the surgeon was gonna be at the wedding, and but just hearing about that process. I mean, I think of surgeons as people who come in sometimes after the patient is out. They don't even say hello sometimes. And this was so different, it was just a closeness between the doctor and the patient.
I think this might have come up in the section on the burns, what I'm about to ask now. You talk about how these efforts can take many years and are enormously expensive, and you write that the products with the most meaningful impact are rarely the biggest money makers. So how does that affect what is developed? How do people deal with this balance between this is the thing that's most needed versus this is the thing that, we're going to hit the jackpot?
Yeah, well, you're swimming upstream, I mean, the thing in burn care, there are something like 70 products that kind of call themselves, artificial skin. They're really they're bio dressings with a hefty price tag. There was a piece in the New York Times about the amount of money Medicare spends/wastes on these. And I spoke to Dr. Goverman, the guy there, and he said, yeah, you can use Icelandic cod skin, and that's about $1,000, or you can use Mepilex, which is an antibacterial sort of with a foam thing, and they'll both, for a second degree burns, they heal pretty well, and one's $1,000 and one is $10, depends on what you want to bill for. So yeah, the way that those products get into the hands of, into hospitals and into surgeons' hands, he said, well, they were offering a junket to Iceland, and I was like, I want to go to Iceland, okay. And so it was kind of an awakening into how these things go and how things are billed for. And it was interesting to be in the operating room, and they were counting off the square inches of what was being used for the billing, calling it out there was someone in the corner who was putting down. At least they actually measured it and didn't make it up.
Yes, it's complicated for sure. So the big problem with a lot of these techniques and great ideas is rejection, that the human body just seems to want to reject anything that is not the human body.
Yeah, it wants to keep you alive. It wants to, if it's not you, it's out of there. It's kind of the attitude of your body. And that was, it was interesting. For 2 books back, I wrote a book that had to do with military science. And for that book, I reported on penis transplant. It was just before the very first penis transplant, because the Department of Defense had been funding this because of the injuries from IEDs, which is a lot bigger than a landmine, and the explosions were not taking off the lower leg. They were going all the way up, to the hips sometimes. And so there was a real need for this. And the very first, there were a few that got a lot of press, and then you just didn't hear much. And I was interested for this book to kind of see, are they routine now? Is Blue Shield covering penis transplants? Is it working? And then I contacted a surgeon who's done a lot of these. They're called composite tissue allotransplantation, which means composite tissue, like these are face transplants, hand transplants, penises, things with a lot of different varieties of tissue, which can be upsetting for the immune system. And I asked him that question. He said it's just been really humbling to see how the immune system just outsmarts us. It just hasn't, he said we did some amazing technical things in terms of connecting nerves and connecting blood supply and all of that, but the immune system just finds a way, and there are people now with a face transplant who are suffering rejection, who need a second face, or people with hand transplants asking to have them removed. It just is, he said it's just been humbling just to see how hard it is to get and you can't blame the human body. It's just like, look, I don't know what this is, but it doesn't seem like what we started out with, and I'm gonna get rid of it. And then, of course, anytime you suppress the immune system, then you have all of those problems of leaving yourself open to infections or cancers and rejection episodes, and it's been, yeah, I think the two things that stand in the way of us all becoming bionic are the immune system and bacteria. Those are the things that
It's heartbreaking to read about people who will go for it, and then they'll live for a couple of months and then they'll die, and you just wonder, well, I'm sure that was explained to them, but you really wonder what their thought process was that they would agree to do that.
Yeah, and I think about, and one of the things with xenotransplants, okay, if it buys you 8 months, well, hopefully it'll buy you a little more than that. And it's thought of as maybe a stopgap, so you can, eventually you'll make your way up the list and get healthy enough to get a human organ, but that's another major transplant. That's a lot to ask the body to do, so, yeah.
One thing that you wrote about that in reference to a really pretty mundane thing that happens now is cataract surgery, which I have had and I'm really glad I did. But you talk about how there are already cases where people in their 20s, they just want to get their lenses. They just want the artificial lens right now, so they don't have to deal with any degradation.
Yeah, there are people who are asking for that. Yeah, but the lenses themselves are great, but there isn't a version of what's called accommodation, which is the eye's amazing autofocus, that you can go from looking at your hand to looking at that sign and back automatically and instantly, and everything in between. We don't have that. Yeah, there are people asking for that. I don't think it's done very often. It's certainly not covered by insurance.
Well, it's so interesting to think about how many things are like that now. Oh man, the fat removal and replacement.
Oh yeah, yeah,
oh,
yeah.
God. And then there's Elon Musk's hair,
Oh yeah. The hair transplants, the history of hair transplants. I really enjoyed the heck out of that.
Yeah.
The person who discovered that was a surgeon named Okuda in Japan, and I found there's a organization that put the Okuda papers online, his handwritten notes, and he was the first one who figured out this concept called donor dominance, and that's why hair transplants work. Because the hair on the top of a man's head is sensitive to testosterone, but the side and the back are not. And if you take them from back here and you put them up here, they're not going to fall out. Donor dominance, right? So he started moving hairs, or he was like taking hair from here, pubic alopecia, which I didn't know is a thing. You can take hair from the head and put it here. The thing is, though, you'll have to trim it. It's gonna grow long. You can also, vice versa also works. You could take armpit or crotch, whatever hair, you can put it on the head. I found there's a clinic in LA that will do that. If you run out of this stuff, you can take it from the body. However, this is a quote, "It is difficult to style." You guys, I really wanted to be able to demonstrate donor dominance to you. So when I was at that clinic, and I donated some follicles to research.
I couldn't believe that. Yeah.
I did. Because I was going to go to this a biotech startup that's working on trying to grow follicles. Anyway, I donated some to science, and I said, could you also take a couple of those head hairs and put them here on my leg, because I wanted to be able to demonstrate, because I thought by the time I go on book tour, I'm going to have long, flowing, luxuriant hair. And he went along with it, because, it's just easier to transplant follicles than to argue with a nitwit. Sadly, it didn't take. It didn't take. He was like, it's not going to, the blood supply to the head is a lot more robust than the lower leg. It's not going to work. I'm like, maybe it will. But anyway, it didn't. But donor dominance, it's an interesting concept. It's also true with fat. If yeah. Did this book just make you ill? When I came in, I heard somebody saying, it's not a dinner table book.
Well, anyway. I'm over and over. I've got one more question, and there are many, many good questions here, and we should get to some of them. But I just am fascinated with why people agree to talk to you. Because they really do, and people will talk to you about these projects that they've worked for a long time on, and they have to be very secretive about, really. But there's some big part of them that just wants to explain themselves. Yeah. And that seems like a very human thing, but I wondered what is your impression?
I think so. I think that I think people enjoy talking about what they do. And I think that when I approach people, I'm enthusiastic and I'm curious, and I think people respond to that. And I also, a lot of times, the people who say yes to me are people who are familiar with a book. So you wouldn't necessarily think that's the case. It might work the other way. They might run fast the other direction. But I think people like the idea of other people understanding what they do and why it's important. I guess that's why they talk to me. I don't know. They're usually okay with what the final product is.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very cool. I think you take us into worlds that we would never see otherwise. I remember I was for Gulp. I remember there was this guy they call it Food Valley in the Netherlands. I can't even pronounce it. Wageningen. And it was this guy who studied chewing, and he'd never talked to anybody about it. His family was tired of hearing about it. And it was just amazing to spend time with him, because he was like, there's this, when you chew, you're pressing down on, say, a nut, and the moment that the nut gives way, your body, your mouth cuts off, and it's a reflex so you don't smash your teeth, and it happens without you even realizing it. And then he was talking about bolus formation, how you take apart a piece of bread, and then you have to put it back together using saliva in a shape that can go down the esophagus. And he was just so enamored with chewing. and all of this was kind of new to me, and I don't know, I felt I was so fond of this person, and how passionate he was for things that people don't even think about. And maybe you don't want to, because I have to say, for weeks afterward, I would go to a restaurant and see people and think they're forming boluses. Oh, there it goes. It's going down. Ah! And me too. I'd be like, oh, I'm forming a bolus. Ah. Oh dear. Okay. Well, thank you. Okay, so, well, I have some very interesting questions here, so I'm going to throw some of them at you.
I hope I can answer some of them.
It says, I wondered about this. You acknowledge in your book that many of the things you discuss are dead ends. What informed your decision to include them in the book anyway?
Many of them are dead ends.
Mm-hmm. Like the project didn't pan out, or they didn't get more funding. That's my interpretation of what it.
Well, the one that the dead end. Maybe what they're referring to is the biotech company that that was trying to grow follicles from induced pluripotent stem cells. They didn't get another round of funding, but by then the book was done. But I also felt like I didn't. It wasn't that concerned with whether they succeeded. I was looking for a startup company that would explain to me, how does this work? I needed an example. It didn't need to be them. It didn't, they were kind enough to bring me into the lab, show me like how do you take blood cells, regress them to their infancy and their state of pluripotency, and then instruct them to become what you want them to. How does that work, and where are we at? That's all I wanted to know. So the fact that it was a dead end didn't really affect that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Were there other dead ends? Was that the main dead end?
I can't think of them, but
anyway. Well, that's why that.
Well, here's one that you alluded to further that takes on the issue more directly. It says, what are the ethics of having a pig grow replacement organs for your personal use? Even if the pig is not self-aware, dispatching a pig to get a heart doesn't seem ethical.
Right. Yeah. That is an issue for sure. The paper that I saw, which mentioned the possibility that some cells could end up in the brain, was a long paper on the ethics of that. I think the reason pigs, I talk about this in the book, and I was curious, like, why pigs? Why are we, and we don't need to go into the history of that. It has to do with the Hormel company in part. But I think because so many millions of pigs are consumed, are raised as food, and people seem to be okay with that. It's like, well, if they're okay with the food thing, they should be okay with saving lives. So my feeling is we should all agree never to eat them, and in exchange for that, some of them will grow organs. That's my solution. But I don't know. What is the ethics of eating pigs? The millions of pigs that are raised for food, which seems even harder to justify.
Right.
I don't eat pork very often.
Here's another interesting one. It's interesting to hear about the body fighting so hard to reject things that are foreign to itself, and also to know that we have so many microscopic organisms on our skin and in our gut with which we happily coexist. Did that seeming contradiction come up in your research?
No, I wrote a whole book about the alimentary canal, everything from the nose to the ass, because the rules are all different in that tube. It's a just hotbed of bacteria, and we are basically donuts, like
We're what?
We're like a donut. Like the hole is, the tube. That's like another universe that different rules apply in there. So, and it's a closed system, right? And then, your skin is kind of the outside. So, no, it didn't really, bacteria, if it stays in its zones, there's certain parts of the body are zoned for bacteria, and that's fine. But if the bacteria leave the zone, now we're in trouble. So,
Here's an interesting question.
Uh-oh.
Why does this book title have 5 syllables instead of 1? Was swap or something similar already taken?
I thought about
That would have been good.
swap,
Yeah.
but we're not all. Yeah, I thought about swap, but that sounds like wife swapping or swap. Swap was not bad. I just liked replaceable you because I remember there's a song Embraceable You, and so it was kind of a fun play on that. But my last book, which was 1 syllable, 1 word, Fuzz, I really wanted animal, vegetable, criminal. I wanted it to be animal, vegetable, criminal. But Mark Bittman, damn him, came out right around the time my book was going into production with animal, vegetable, junk, which is not as nice a play on animal, vegetable, mineral as animal, vegetable, criminal. And packing for Mars, I'm breaking out of my rut.
Right.
But yeah, swap. I thought about swap.
I have a couple of questions about the human organ transplant list. I don't know. This is
Yeah, I didn't really get into the list. You could ask it, but I probably don't have an answer.
It says you mentioned the human organ transplant list. Did the experience of researching writing this book change your thoughts about how transplant priority is organized?
Well, one thing I really wish was that we in this country had an opt-out system, which is to say you're presumed to want to donate your organs unless you take an action and opt out. Whereas in certain countries in Europe, you're presumed, in Europe, you're presumed to be a donor unless you opt out. Here, you're presumed to not be a donor unless you opt in, So I wish that we had an opt-out system. Like you have to take action to opt out. Yes, right. But that seems unlikely to happen here. But that's one thing that would help a lot. Mm-hmm. If you were presumed to be in the system, unless now you've got to go to the effort of getting the dot on your license or filling out a form or whatever. So.
Right.
It'd be nice if it was reversed. But there's some interesting work being done that I talk about in the book. The University of Michigan is working on has an extracorporeal life support laboratory, meaning extracorporeal outside the body, and they're trying to find ways to extend the shelf life of organs that are given for donation. So right now, the traditional put it on ice, you've only got like 4 to 6 hours to get it somewhere. And now they're looking at, well, could we get it to, 24, 48, or even weeks, so that you could bank organs. And so you could have and if you had more time, you could test them, see how well they work, possibly fix them, kind of like a reconditioned laptop. Because a lot of them are thrown there's an age cutoff. But what if it's an ultra marathoner and the heart's in great shape? You don't want to throw that away. It would be better to be able to test it, assess it, and make the decision based on that.
This reminds me. There's speaking of organ donation. There's a fascinating chapter in this book where Mary observes what happens to an organ donor.
Yeah, tissue donor.
Yeah, as tissue donor, right? As they're harvested, and that was a case where I was like, I'm amazed that they let you watch that because it was pretty.
Yeah, it took some doing.
I bet it did.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was good. I mean, everything from the debate with the family to step by step.
Yeah, I followed a man from when he died and the process by which the family had to be interviewed and there's, the clock is ticking, and then he showed up around midnight, and I stayed there through 4 a.m. watching this whole procedure. Strangely, a lot of it has to do with labeling and double checking and packing, like you're expecting the Jeffrey Dahmer story, and it's more like UPS. It's like 95 labels for the, and double checking, and it's a you don't want those things mixed up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I seem to remember that we were. Does anybody want to come up and ask a question? I think we were supposed to do that.
Oh, we were?
I think.
Oh, yeah, maybe. We don't know what we're doing up here.
Got one over here.
Oh, look at that. We're being... Hello.
Oh, well.
How often are bones?
Oh, hi.
How often are bones or joints replaced? And is it a viable alternative to anything?
To viable alternatives to whole joints?
If someone needs a femur replaced, or if they need a joint replaced, that would be very difficult to do. But is it a viable alternative at all? Are those sorts of things done at all?
Well, they're pretty much any joint you want there's to have replaced. Well, you have to have a reason, but there are replacement joints.
Right.
Man-made materials.
Okay.
But what are you asking? Is there an alternative to the titanium or whatever?
Well, I didn't know there was a titanium available to do that sort of thing. Are the replacements successful usually?
Knees and hips, they've gotten very good at it. I mean, the first hip replacement was 1938. They've been at it quite a while.
I would think a shoulder replacement.
Yeah,
would
the
be
shoulder
very,
is
very
newer.
difficult.
The shoulder is newer, and it's an interesting one because the patient is sitting up. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, they do shoulders. They do, I think really all of them. With spine is a little tricky.
Oh, man.
Okay.
So-
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, first thing is, I'm Jewish. I've never eaten a pig in my life. We'll
Wait.
get that out of the way. I'm Jewish and I practice. I'm not perfect,
Okay.
but I'm working on it. And I've never eaten a pig in my life. And to this day, I cannot understand how people eat pigs because they're smarter than most people's dogs. So, as a note. And also, I worked at Harborview in rehab. So, I could tell you stories. But one of the things, and also I'm bionic, I have 2 new hips. Okay, because one was jealous that the other one got done, so it decided to disintegrate.
Yeah, well, you don't
on
want to
me.
be lopsided.
No, well, except I'm not. They're not as good, by the way. They're great on ball and socket, but be careful on knees because they're not so good on hinges. So I haven't done that. So the other thing, it's like this is the thing that's interesting is I sat through this and I thought, why is anybody weirded out? I mean, it doesn't seem weird to me, but then after you've bathed a burn victim, I can tell you, you don't know how lucky everyone in this room is. Because after I got home that night, I said, if I complain about anything like that, you are allowed to take me and read me the riot act. So,
Well, thanks. We got time for one more question, so why
so
don't we...
I just want to say this much. Get people to volunteer for organ donating. If you could get everyone in this room to be an organ donor.
Well, I'm trying. I put my pitch in.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more.
Just building off of one of the questions you brought up about ethics, in having read some of your other books and being excited for this one, what's like the biggest ethical conundrum I think that you faced on this book specifically? For you personally, like the one that hit you the hardest.
The biggest ethical conundrum in this book? Okay, here's something this is a footnote. I didn't even put it in the text because it's beyond me. Okay, it's, when you talk about induced pluripotency, you could take cells, blood cells, skin cells, and you could regress them right to the state of pluripotency, and you could then instruct them to become another type of cell. And if you decided as a man to make it an egg cell, or as a woman to make it a sperm cell, then you could kind of create your own. You wouldn't need anybody else. You could just be just you. And I thought, that's going to appeal to Elon Musk. Anyway, yeah, I don't know what the ethics of that are, but yeah.
Well, on that note, well, thank you so much for coming to Seattle and
Oh, thank you.
sharing with us.
Thank you all. Thank you.
And, great. And
I
I
wondered
think
if the sound of clapping made a.
thank you all. Thank you. All right. I think Mary's going to sign books.
I just want to see how it's.
Oh dear. Thank you for coming.